Hello, my name is Mia Bays, for those of you who don't know us, and I run Bird's Eye View, and we are a mission to bring ever greater audiences to films by women from around the world. For us, it is about promoting the female perspective, not about person putting women within the frame. So the name of our mission is called Reclaim the Frame, and it's about recognizing that the people who have the power in terms of filmmaking, narrative, storytelling are the people who write, direct, and tell the story. And I'm delighted to welcome a very powerful storyteller from Brazil, joining us from Rio de Janeiro, Maya Darin, and we are going to talk about your extraordinary debut, The Fever. Welcome, Maya. It's lovely to meet you. I can't actually hear. Have we got, is it just me or is it an issue with sound?
See if now it works.
That's
yeah?
better.
Yeah.
There we are. I can hear you.
Sorry for that. Thank you, Mia. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. I'm very happy to be able to talk about The Fever with you today. Thank you.
Beautiful. So before we start talking about your fictional debut, you're a documentarian originally, a visual artist. This is your narrative fictional debut. Before we talk about The Fever, I would just like to understand you as an artist a little bit. Did film find you, or did you find film? How did your love affair with film start?
Well, I've started working with cinema when I was quite young. I was 17. I worked in a TV channel as in the department of art direction. And this was my first experience. It was a work experience, we call, for young people. And then after that, during university, I started to do my first short films, while at the same time I worked as assistant director for feature fiction films. And so for some years, I have been working with different directors in Brazil and as their assistant. And this was an important experience for me in the craft of filmmaking, And I've always felt more close to a more manufacture, in the sense that something that is more near to experience with a small crew, and in the sense that we can be more near to what we are making. And then I have been working first with I've been making documentaries in the first place, my first movies. I did a short documentary first, then two feature documentaries that were short in the southwest of the Amazon region. And this was the first time I went to the Amazon, and it was also the origin for The Fever. Then I went to do different things. I've been working doing also video installations for some time. I've been invited to some residences also, where I did some artistic projects, and then I came back to film with The Fever. That's my first fiction film.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maya. So let's talk about The Fever. It's a very, for me, unique piece of work, and it's very dreamlike, but I could tell even before researching you that you had a very strong kind of documentarian eye, and the blend is really quite powerful. So can we talk first of all, for people who haven't seen the film, let's talk a little bit about the story. Can we just talk about where the story came from? So it's the story of Justino, and he is a security guard in Manaus, and he is being haunted by an animal in his dreams, which I just love how he describes. He describes the animal as an empty body, no organs, just skin, a heart still beating. Wow, where even did that line come from? It's very powerful. So tell us the jumping off point of the story.
So the first idea came from these documentaries I've made in the southwest of the Amazon. This was back in 2006, so a long time ago. And on that moment, while shooting, I have met some indigenous families that have left the territories in the forest to come to live in the cities of that region. And I ended by becoming friends of one of these families. And the relationship we established, the conversations we had in the years that have followed, brought me the idea, the desire to make a fiction film about a family that had made this same migration movement, from their village to live in the city. And then I had to pass through Manaus to come to that region. So I had already spent some time in Manaus during these years, and it's a city that has always really intrigued me. It's a city where there are many indigenous people that come to live there. So the biggest part of Manaus city are from migrants that come from the Amazon region, but also that come from all these regions of Brazil, because in the 60s, during the dictatorship in Brazil, as part of this huge developmental program that we had in Brazil. So the idea that you have to make the interior of the country more populated, to protect the country, to protect its frontiers, the idea that we need to civilize these regions also. All this colonial project that was also part of the dictatorship in Brazil. They decided to create the industrial pole in Manaus, the Dutch Free Zone. And the city, from that time, this was in the end of the 60s, the city has grown enormously. On that time, we had 200 people, and nowadays we have more than 2 million. In more or less a little bit more than 50 years. And together with people that come from different regions of Brazil looking for work in the industrial pole, many indigenous people also came to live in the city. So it's a city that was built in a place called Manaus, and Manaus is the name of an indigenous ethnicity, Brazilian indigenous ethnicity that used to live in that exactly region where the city was built. And then with the time, Manaus was built facing its back towards the forest. And it's a huge concrete city with huge avenues. And that's part of this, let's say, this colonial and capitalist project of civilization, that establish little contact with the forest, with its beings, with its forms of lives. And this is something that's really present in Manaus, in its geography and in its history. So this is why I decided to settle the film there, because there are many elements that I wanted to work in the fever that were very present in the landscape of the city of Manaus. Mm-hmm. And well, that's the origin of the film. And then we had a long process of rehearsal. And I think that this goes a little bit more with your question. I've come to Manaus many times with one of my co-writers, Miguel Sebra Lopes, and then we stayed for long periods in the locations where the film would be shooted. So I spent some weeks following the day-to-day routine of the workers of the port of Manaus. That's where Justino, our lead character, our main character, works. And then I also spent some weeks following the day-to-day of the nurse in a health center in the outskirts of Manaus, where his daughter, that's another important character of the movie, would work. Then we also visit different indigenous villages in the outskirts of Manaus, talking with people, and all these experiences was very important to write the script of the film. So for me, it's very difficult to start writing from a white page. I really need to be with people in the places, talking with people, and then this is what's gonna feed me. And normally it's also with these collaborations that I can start work, because then actually after that, when the actors came on board, the indigenous actors, we had a long work with them. He writing the script together and with improvising the scenes, changing things, and so we had many changes in the script that came after that due to the collaboration of the indigenous characters.
Mm-hmm. And you spent 6 years researching, is that and putting this together? Is that correct amount of time?
Yes, we started the project. It was the end of 2012 and beginning 2013. The first time I went to Manaus to rehearse to the project and then we have shooted in April 2018. So around 6 years. Yeah.
Wow. And what were your intentions when you started the film off, and how did they change as you progressed and as you lived amongst the people?
Well, it's difficult really to precise because the process is so organic that nowadays it's difficult to really see how exactly things went. But the film have changed a lot. We had a completely different storyline in the beginning, a different synopsis in the beginning. The main character was not Justino, but his son. And then while rehearsing, I could understand better the characters and mostly as I have talked with many people also during the casting process that has lasted over a year. So we visit different communities and we have been very welcomed by people, and we had really long conversations and really deep conversations about the life stories of people that had faced experiences similar to Justino, to our character. And all this was very important to me to better understand the conflicts of Justino and his inner experience of what he was living, of this migration movement to the city of Manaus. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, when Regis came on board, this was the moment where I could really start to build more deeply the character mm-hmm. together with him.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a bit more about the casting process. So you said it took a year to find your main characters. And what was it? What were you looking for? What was it? And how much did they then inform the writing process as well, your actors?
Well, when I first saw Regis, there was something about the precision of his movements, of his presence. He's really present, on the moment where he is. There is an attention to the encounters. And then in this first moments we only talked, and then in a second encounter we did some kind of video essays together, and then we were moving the space a little bit and we are trying things out, very simple things, not really scenes of the film yet. And then the way he would move in a kind of white room was so precise that somehow I could see where he was moving. That was not in that room. So one of the exercises I have proposed to have the work together was something related with chasing, and it was in a forest. And then only by his movement, somehow this forest started to be present in that room. So there was a way of moving and of being together with the environment, of being together of what he's calling to be here with him. Of managing also to make other things present due to his presence. That's very intense. That for me it was clear on that moment that there were many things of what I imagine in Justino in Regis, and many things of Regis that could transform Justino in a different way, of everything I could ever imagine. Mm-hmm. Because it would for sure be a lot more intense in the sense that it was a actual experience of life.
Mm-hmm. And your lead character Justino is a member of the Desana people. And so can you talk a little bit about why you decided to make your lead character of an indigenous storyteller and a key part of the narrative, really, and juxtapose him between the land and between this very built up city? You see him in this place where as soon as you look at him, you know that he just doesn't look like he fits. So can you talk a bit about, especially for us, an English-speaking audience who don't necessarily know the wider context, can you fill in a bit more around, why you made those decisions, particularly since you're not Desana?
Yeah, so in Brazil, when I was shooting these documentaries, it was a moment that people didn't talk very much about this reality in Brazil. A huge amount of the indigenous population in Brazil lives nowadays in cities. I think that's around 80%. And it's not something that we talked a lot in Brazil and that we knew a lot in Brazil. There were still a huge prejudice that is still there nowadays, very strong. But I believe that in the last 15 years, it has been changing slowly. Now we are passing through a slow process of change. But before that, there was this huge prejudice in the sense that people that came to live in the city, I think that Brazilian people, and the same thing happens abroad, maybe in England, I'm not sure, but for what I can experience, the idea that people relate indigenous people with a idea, a certain stereotype that's normally a cliche of an image created of indigenous people in opposition to the image of the Western people and non-indigenous people. So we can only conceive indigenous people as being the authentic indigenous people, and there is still this romanticized idea of the identical indigenous people. No, everyone wants to go to an indigenous village that is authentic one. I mean, and everyone is able to make this image of what would be authentic indigenous village, that people would like to be able to visit. But normally it does not go with the image of an indigenous person that lives in a city. And so there is a lot of prejudice going on there. And normally people that migrate to live in the cities had to face a very, very hard experience of identity and together with the displacement, because in the city they had to face the prejudice that is very strong in Brazil regarding indigenous people, because they are indigenous people. So a very, very huge prejudice because of that, but at the same time, the idea that they are not really authentic indigenous people. So they are not Western, but they are not Brazilian exactly, because they are indigenous, but they are not indigenous. So this no identity, and everything that goes along with this difficulty of affirming its own identity, of being recognized in a positive way on its own identity, something that has always been very strong in Brazil, and that is due to all this colonization, long process, 500 years, and also due to the fact that Brazil is a country that has been built over this huge genocide. Is a country that has been constructed over the bodies of million people that have been killed. Probably the huge genocide we have lived in the history of the world is the colonizations of America. And this is something that when I came to Amazon for the first time was due to an interest in the frontiers with South America, mostly. And I've been working on documentaries about these frontiers and about this migration process. But very soon it became clear to me that on these regions of the frontier of Brazil with South America, the indigenous people were really affected by the frontiers, in the sense that these lines have cut people's territories. And nowadays people find it's difficult for people to be able to visit their parents in the other side, in another country. We have one-time people ruled by the rules of different countries. So we have many difficulties due to a system that has never looked to the people and to their needs and to their rights. And this is what moved me to make the film and to think about a fiction film with an indigenous protagonist. So the idea that also in Brazil we have a long history of films about indigenous people. but it's still hard. Nowadays it's changing a little bit, and of course we have some exceptions in the story of our cinematography, but in South America, and I would say in America in general, it's still hard that we have indigenous protagonists talking on their mother language in a film. And this is something that happily is starting to change. And it was very touching for us when we got the feedback from the public. And I had many people writing to me saying about the feeling of seeing a film for the first time spoken on their mother language, or being identified with a protagonist, with a character that was living things that they have also passed through. And this feeling of identification, when we see that most of the work of arts that we produce in the countries are not made for the indigenous people to be able to identify themselves with.
I mean, that's an extraordinary feat, really, because you actually, I mean, the language is Tucano. I understand that they speak in the film, and you do not speak this language. So you made a film in a language that you actually do not speak. And also there's very overt, we have a scene where there's very overt racism. So to pick up on the point that you were talking about, that we really understand how othered indigenous people are still in the modern day, as you've just explained. Can you just talk about sort of, that's quite a big challenge for someone who's not indigenous to kind of, you know, I'm sure you must have had a kind of moral dilemma over your own right to tell this story and to also make a film in a language that's not yours. So can you just talk us through how you found your way through that?
It was a very intense process, a lot of learning involved on that. For sure, each step, I was also always asking myself about it, and it was very important, the alliance, how do you say it in English, the collaborations I had during the process to be able to carry on making the film. So first of all, it was very important to listen. Rehearse was very important. So to be searching, to be rehearsing, it was very important also. But mostly to listen and to be with people. So I've started writing the script. I knew that it would be a first guide for me to be able to move, to be able to start founding the project, to get the resources to be able to cast the film and all that. But it was really the moment in which the actors started that I started to work together with the actors, that the film really got its shape. And this collaboration was very important to what the film has become also. So we had different indigenous actors, all then come from the upper Black River, so the upper Rio Negro region that is in the north of the Brazil, the north of the Amazonas, in the frontier with the Venezuela. And there are 23 different indigenous people that live, but they are exogamic, so they marry between themselves, and this since a long time, since before colonization. And this what happens is that people have some cultural elements in common, some cosmological elements also in common. And after the arrival of the Salesian missionaries, I don't know how to pronounce it right in English, Tucano has become a kind of lingua franca, so a kind of common language between people, due to the internet schools, something very close to what existed in Canada, for example, and the scandal that it has come down soon in some months. So it happened also in that region, and as the children from different people had to be together and had to study together, the missionaries started to work with them with one same indigenous language together with the Portuguese, so people could understand each other. And then it when we start to work together, it was clear that Tucano was the language we would adopt in the film, because it is the first language of Regis and of Rosa. Regis is the Sana, and Rosa is Tariano, another ethnic group of that region. But they knew each other before because they have already lived in the same village, and both of them talked Tucano as a first language, and also the other actors. And then we had a long process of rehearsing in which we started telling stories to each other. And this was very important, as we all came from different backgrounds, even the indigenous actors, because they came from different indigenous villages, even though they were from the same region. They came to Manaus in different moments of their lives also. So they have passed through different experiences. So we started this moment of telling stories and of listening to each other was very important to us to be able to understand that we were telling a story together, and what was the story that we wanted to tell together. No, and for me, it was very, very. It was very important to be able to have this moment, to have this time, because we had a long rehearsal, and something that's hard in cinema, that we have the opportunity to do that, to be months rehearsing and listening to each other and together with each other, and that the actors could have also this availability, to be there for so many hours. And then after that, we started improvising. So we would read the scene in the script, we would talk about that, we would see what made sense on that for us or not, and for them as well. And then they would start improvising the scene in Portuguese first, and then in Tucano. And then when the scene went to Tucano, I couldn't understand anymore. And this was really interesting to me also, first because I lost control of what was happening, and this was also a way of finding equilibrium in this relationship that's not really equilibrated, because the forces are different. And so it was a way that they could get it to themselves, and that they could work on it with freedom, and then they could propose something different from that. And normally when they made the scene in Tucano, the scene would have a completely different rhythm, for example. And then for me it was very interesting, because I could be more focused on the rhythm, on the gestures, on other things than the dialogue, because I couldn't understand what they were saying. And then we would bring the scene back to Portuguese, and then I would see what have changed in the dialogues with their translation, and then we would discuss about that. And normally the scene would be very different. So sometimes the dialogues were different, the rhythms, as I said, the gestures, the mise-en-scène also, the way the bodies were in the space. Because what's very interesting is because a language is not only a tool to communicate something, but it's a system of thought, that is that is embodied in a language. So with the language changed, everything changed together with it. So the rhythm they would do the scene in Portuguese would be completely different than the rhythm they would do the scene in Tucano. And that's why working in their mother language was so important, because when we would work, for example, in a scene in Portuguese, like the one of the human resources, the moments in which Justino is in the city, or is in his working place, in talking with people that don't speak Tucano, with Brazilian people, he would be a lot less comfortable in the scene. And this, in our film, it went together with the feeling Justino was also feeling. These were moments in which our character wasn't very comfortable in this position, in these places either. So things happen to match each other in that sense also. And language has been a very important tool for us in very different aspects of the film. Also, it was very interesting because as they were acting Tucano, the moments they wanted to talk with each other in the set, and they wanted nobody to understand, they had this possibility, and this was very, very interesting also, so, for example, when they were creating a scene, they could be discussing for hours and shouting with each other and trying to see this could be the best word, or that could be the best word, or they were diverging and the possibility of doing that in their own language, and that we could not understand that, also gave some space for something different to happen.
Wow, that's very powerful. I think you're very rare, Maya, because the fact that you talk about with such positivity about giving up control and not needing to understand is very unusual. Where does that confidence come from? I think that comes from a very deep confidence that you know what you see something special, and it's sort of, perhaps, as you said, beyond words. Where does that come from in you or your work?
I don't feel myself very confident. I think we are always kind of, control is something that we are always working on, no? Mm-hmm. In our lives. When you have children, and I had children lately after shooting the film, it's something that gets really present to us. No, we have to be the whole time working on that, on control. No, and this is something very strong in Western society also. No, the way humankind wants to control everything around them. Yeah. Wants to control the world around them for their well-being, for their only well-being. Mm-hmm. So this superiority of being above the others is something that goes together with control. And then when you start to experience looking for things in different angles and looking to things, to people, to other entities, from different angles, together with them, from different positions, I think that more interesting things happen. In the sense that also all the weight that we carry with us, because when we are controlling things, there is a huge weight we carry in our backs, no? And this is very clear with children, for example. So when we understand that we have a lot to learn with the people we are together with the people we are trying to control, and we kind of give away this position, and for sure, I'm saying that now, but this is really a challenge. In the set of shooting, I've been controlling many things, a lot more than I would like to have the need to control. So that's why I say it's really a very constant exercise, that you have to be very attentive to it the whole time. I'm a very controller person, and I'd love to be less and less, because I think that we are more happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very profound. I think maybe the other word is maybe trust, not so much confidence, but you had to trust your collaborators. You had to trust that the story would be found by everyone, not just you.
But I think we have no option with film. We cannot make film alone. Sure, we can make like little essay films, like home movies, things that nowadays even more with the mobile phone. We can make really films in a different way. And what I find very positive, in the sense that there is something related to filmmaking, in the sense of the scale of the budgets in the world we live, that is not fitting. No, so there is something about filmmaking that we need to think about, the amount of resources we need to put together to be able to make a film. No, it's not very sustainable in an ecological way of thinking. No, and so for sure we can do with a lot less, but if you want to make a fiction film in the way, for example, The Fever is, we cannot make it alone. So we need to trust on our collaborators, and this is what makes a film, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Picking up that point you just made about it's not ecological, going back to the film, it's clear that you are saying something very profound, or certainly one reads something very profound about what man has done to the world, and what man can't do to the world, and what nature just does for itself, for good and bad. And so can you just talk a bit about, I mean, maybe this is something you want the audience to decide for themselves, but can you talk about the intention behind the kind of ecological angle of the film and the story?
Yeah, it's interesting because you are kind of phrasing the question through a different angle also than normally people phrase, and then it's interesting to look on that way. Many people ask me about the relation nowadays between the film and the COVID, for example, and what's happening in the world. No, and Justino, for people that haven't watched the film, Justino, he starts to feel a fever. He starts to have a fever. His daughter, she's a nurse in a health clinic, in a public health clinic. She has just been accepted to study medicine in the University of Brasilia, that's the capital of the country. So she's going to live, and Brasilia is very far from Manaus, so she's going to live to a place where her father won't be able to come to visit her, and she probably is going to be there for 4 or 5 years at least. That's the time the 5-6 years the University of Med School takes place, lasts. So Justino starts to feel this fever and illness for the Dessana people, for the people from the upper Rio Negro and from Amerindian people in general in Brazil. They can have different causes, no? So it can be caused by what they call as white people illness. As with colonization, there were many different illnesses that indigenous people, the Dessana people, didn't have before, and that were brought together with white people. And for this kind of illness is important the white man medicine also, because it's the only medicine that's going to be able to treat the white man illness, but there are also other types of illness, and these different types of illness, they can have different origins, but some of them they take place due to a lack in the equilibrium between the ill person and the environment around him. And normally it's related with a kind of break in this equilibrium that's caused by some reason, and that's affecting other people around him. And these other people can be the people of a certain tree, or the people of a certain animal species. For example, as Justino tells to his grandson in the dinner table, he tells him a story about a hunter that was very, very greedy, and even though he had a lot of food in his house, he went to hunt that night because he was feeling like hunting. And then he goes to the forest, and then it starts a very huge rain, and then he waits to the rain to stop. He falls asleep while waiting, and then a monkey gets him and brings him to the monkey's kingdom. And then when he gets there, the monkey shows him to different people that are ill for different reasons. And then monkey people, no? And then he understands actually that he's able not only to provoke, not only to kill the monkey, but he's also able to cure the monkey. No, so he's able to bring the cure, and then he can get back home. No, and this, I think, it's a story that embodies it a lot of the issues related to these different kinds of illness that affect indigenous people. And what happens with Justino is, as he's in a completely different environment, in a city, as the city of Manaus, where the equilibrium has been lost long ago, and where the way this city is working and what the city is producing is the whole time affecting the life of other people around the city. You know, his own life and his own body is also in disequilibrium because he's part of that system. No, so this would be a kind of more broader and general way of explaining. It can be a lot more precise, no, and it can be explained by the Sana people in more precise ways. But I think that this gives an image that we can maybe connect a little bit more in the sense you meant, no, of what is the ecological learning that these stories can bring to us, and maybe for me the way I see it, because it's going to be different, and what's really nice for me in the film is that I get feedback, very different feedbacks from different people. So the Sana people is going to give me different readings from a person that is from France, and then a person that is from Brazil, but from the south of Brazil, and really different interpretations of the story, and this really rich for me, that the film is able to provoke these different comprehensions and understandings of the story on people. But for me, what you asked as an ecological idea of the story would be related to that, no, to the illness we are creating in the environment around us when we are part of this engineering that is causing a disequilibrium, because we are part of it, no.
Yes, beautiful. Yes, I agree. Can we bring it back also to Justino? Is also, it's very much for me. I lost my father last year, and I lost my mother a few years before that, and I felt very profoundly that the film was about loss and about grief. And Justino, we learn, has just lost his wife in the movie. We meet him just after, when he's still grieving. His, as you said, his daughter has to tell him that she's successful, she has won a place to study, but that means also that she will leave. And so can you just talk about that? It's about a man losing these women that are very, very precious to him. So can you talk about kind of, your intentions behind that?
My sentiments, Mia, my feelings. Well, one of the greatest reasons for which people I have talked with, and even in census in Brazil, move to the cities, indigenous people, are the education, the need for education. And there is something that I find really beautiful also, that is a way of understanding things among Amerindian people in Brazil. That is the idea that to be able to fight, we need to know the weapons of our enemy somehow. So to be able to protect ourselves and to fight against a system, we need to know how this system works. We need to be able to speak the language of that system, so we can make ourselves being understood, And the movement that Vanessa made in the film to come to study in a med school is something that was possible in a Brazil of 20 years ago. And this was the Brazil in which I've written the film, because I've written the story a lot before we had the elections that brought the extreme right to the power in Brazil in the end of 2018. When that happened, we had already shooted the film. We had shooted in April, and the elections were in October. So we didn't know that it would happen. We didn't expect it to happen. And I think it has been really a shock for many of us. But what I was talking about is that the story was written in a different moment of my country, in a different historical moment of my country, in which after in the 20 years, a little around, a little less, we had the left wing in the power. There were many politics for the minorities that have been implemented, and one of them have been the quota programs that have enabled many indigenous people, Black people, to come to university and to graduate in different professions. And nowadays we have indigenous people as doctors and law and administration, anthropology, in different working posts in Brazil. And I have always seen that women somehow were very ahead in this movement also. we have a very strong indigenous movement nowadays happening in Brazil that is being leading by women. So we have very strong women in the leadership of the indigenous movement nowadays in Brazil. And also many women doing PhD in the professionals, many indigenous women doing PhD in the professionals, being curators in important museums, for example, as filmmakers, doing great works. And so there's something very important and very beautiful to see, especially if we think that many of the indigenous societies, of the Amerindian indigenous societies, they are also patriarchal, no? So it's really a fight for indigenous women to be able to cross it and to make themselves heard and to find a space in their own societies and in the around society, the Brazilian society also. And I don't know, I think that for me somehow, and I wouldn't be able to elaborate much about that, but there was something very strong in Justino, that is the woman around him. Some people have already asked me why having a male protagonist, no? And yeah, I believe that it's not exactly like this that the fight works, because the questions that we are raising in the film, I think that there are questions that somehow are putting gender in a different perspective, in the sense of the relation Justino established with his daughter and with his wife that's not there anymore. And so the female presence in him was something that really interested me. And I'm happy to hear to a question and see that's present somehow in the film.
Yes, it's profoundly moving, that aspect of it. I wanted to ask also, has the meaning of the film changed post-pandemic? Has it, I mean, you said you've been asked about it a lot. I can imagine why people have aligned around this mysterious illness. But has the meaning of the film changed for you? Because you made it, obviously, and a lot have changed in Brazil politically, but also in the world. And so, yeah, what has the film changed in any way for you?
I find it interesting with The Fever, because the meaning of the film is always changing. Since the beginning, since I started to write the project, there is something that's always changing, and this of it being kind of movable object really interests me. Somehow is the beauty I see in the film, it's related to that, to this kind of more metamorphosis quality that the film has somehow. For sure, after pandemic, I think that many people relate to the film, and then people are going to say that there was something that the film was projecting, or the film was seeing in advance. I don't know. I think we feel things somehow, things that are there, that are present. No, all of us. When things happen, there is something that's being felt around before things to happen. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we are all able to feel it, because it's part of our history. So, for example, what the film talks about is part of the history of Brazil since 500 years ago. No, it's part of all this history of the country that's going to end, not end the world, but it is going to have its consequence in the COVID pandemic. That's something of the world, but it's part of a movement of the world that started with colonization. Probably if we didn't have colonization, COVID, on that way, if colonization hadn't happened in that way, and we didn't have the modification of the world and the westernization of the world on that way it happened, COVID wouldn't spread around in the same way it did. So sure, no, we are living a historical illness, in the sense that it has historical baggage, no, historical, and it happens due to our movements in the planet, and it's very curious, and I think we have a lot to learn about that it's an illness that comes from animals, no, and that affects us human beings. So I think it tells a lot about our relation with the environment around us. And for sure, I think after COVID, people are going to look to the film in a different way, because it changed our way of looking to things. Yeah. Maybe the film was already looking for this kind of relations between things, but many of us wasn't very much attentive to it. And with COVID, I think, we started to be more attentive to the bacteria, for example, to small kind of lives that we were really not perceiving it around. Yeah. And the power, these forms of lives have to change and modify things and give life and take life away. So maybe all of us, we started to be more attentive, a little bit more attentive to our movements and to the consequence of our movements, because before we all find ourselves a little bit invincible. We are traveling each week to a different country. We work with cinema, it was 1 week in a festival, then we had to go to this movement that we make wouldn't be moving anything else. As taking a plane by week wouldn't move anything else. Wouldn't affect anything else. No. And as we could, and all this privilege of being able to do that we have this privilege because many people don't have, I think it started to be more stamped in our face, in the sense that things really have consequence. And the quantity of fuel that we are moving to be able to do all these movies, all these movements around, the quantity of energy we are. So, well, yeah. And for sure, nowadays in Brazil, with the election of Bolsonaro, with the political moment we have in Brazil, I think that it also gave new meanings for the film, also in the sense of what happens with Justino, with the prejudice he faces. That's something that has been always happening in Brazil, very, very present, that indigenous people were feeling that on, or were passing through that on a day-to-day basis, but people that are considered as white people in Brazil were not facing that on their daily lives in the same way as now they start to be more attentive to what's part of our country. But Bolsonaro only could be elected because this mentality was present in Brazil. If not, he would never be elected. So it has always been there.
And we've been talking for quite a while, and it's been amazing. I could talk to you for another hour at least, Maya, but I don't
Sorry, Mia.
Too long. No, it's amazing. I wanted to ask, your life has changed, and so I presume as your art, you've become a mother of 3 children. You have triplets, and that's quite an extraordinary impact on your life. And it would be really, I think, interesting to hear, because as we said before we went live, it's kind of unusual to talk about motherhood in relation to movie making, and how it maybe changes how you work and what kind of stories you tell. So whatever part of that you want to discuss, it would be lovely to hear from you.
Thank you, Mia. Sorry for being so prolix.
No, you weren't. You're amazing. No, this has been riveting.
So, yes, I think that is something that we don't really talk about, the relation between motherhood and cinema. And it's something that when we are facing it, it's almost like we have to, we feel that there is a demand of the world, as we would need to erase this part of our life to be able to present ourselves as a filmmaker, as if it was something that was disturbing.
Yeah.
People don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we say that we cannot be available in a specific time because we need to put our children in bed, or even if when you talk about personal things in that sense, as to give a reason for something, is something that's like, no, this is your private life, no, as if it was possible to have a division between these things when we are motherhooding children. And trying to cope that together with work. We also see, I think now festivals are trying to make a effort to try to find ways and possibilities in film festivals, but has always been very difficult to attend film festivals, bring children with us. Me with triplets, for example, it's really a challenge. And so the structure, how festivals, how places, how residences, for example, can be prepared to welcome people that have children, and how we can also start to think that this it needs to also start to happen with the male filmmakers also, that the same kind of questioning or difficulties that I face as a woman filmmaker, that I hope that in not so long, male filmmakers are going to face also, that they want to make a residence, that they need to spend 6 weeks in a place, and that they have children, and that the children have to come to spend some of these weeks with them at least, and how residents and festivals are going to cope with that. And now, for example, Kleber Mendonça Filho, that is a important Brazilian filmmaker, he was jury of the Cannes Film Festival, and he has attended with his twins. They are older now, but it was very beautiful to see that. And then he has posted something after about a program in Cannes organized by a group of people to children care, to child care during the festival, and how helpful it was. And it's great to see a male filmmaker now in a position like that as jury of an important festival as Cannes, coming with his 2 children and trying to go around with that. And for sure, it's only possible because he has the help of his companion, of his wife, Melanie. And for me, it's only possible because I have the help of my companion, Felipe. And he's very active in helping me with the children, and not helping me, but in taking care of his children and help me in my work, when I need. But I ask myself about the people, the filmmakers that raise their children without the father or without the mother, and that have even more huge challenge in front of them, and because on the other hand, it's so incredible. It's such an incredible change in life. And our perspectives change so much, and our works change so much, and it would be wonderful that we could really be able to do things together. And I mean, film would also get a lot from it, in the sense that the films get more complex and more interesting also, because our way of looking to things also change.
I 100% agree, Maya. And can you, is there any further, have you got, before we wrap up this conversation, which has been really very special, really special, have you got any final thoughts or anything that you didn't say about the fever for the audience? Anything that people going into that haven't seen it yet, or people coming out who have seen it that you want them to think about?
Well, I don't know, it's difficult to really get things to, especially for me, to get things to one thing. For me, it has been a very strong learning experience, and I have changed completely after the experience of making the film, and after what I have learned with that. So I hope that people, when they watch it, they can be open to what the film is proposing, and also to what the actors in the film are bringing to us, because I think that a lot in The Fever is in the presence of the actors. For me, it has been really, really a very great learning experience working with them, because as they come from traditional oral traditions, no, and they grow up listening to stories, and the knowledge is passed from generation to generation as a oral, in an oral form. The indigenous actors, Regis, Rosa, and all the other actors, they had a really special memory that I haven't seen not even in professional actors before. So working with them was something very special in that sense, because they had this presence of being there and not really having the words written in a paper wouldn't give them wouldn't make them feel more easy on their roles, or give them more security to play, because knowledge came in a different way. And for me, this was very important also. And it's something that I brought to me in my life also, the idea of trying to connect and be there when things are happening, and let things to pass through us, and more than everything that we create. No, we have so many things around us to give us security, but we don't need many of them. So this goes back to what you were saying about trust, no? Being able of trusting in the encounters we have, in the exchanges we have, and then this is going to give us a lot more security in life, a lot more space to set ourselves, I believe.
That's very beautiful, Maya. Yeah, speaking to you, I understand why the film is very special, because you have put enormous amount of thought into this, and the way that you've approached it feels very, very unique. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
So thank you very much, Mia.
It's wonderful that The Fever is out here in the UK. So it's in cinemas. You can go to Bird's Eye View Watch Now page, and there is a list of cinemas. So please see it in the cinema, because I actually haven't seen it on the big screen. I'm going to see it on the big screen next week. I saw it on a link. So if you aren't near a cinema, you can watch it on Curzon on demand or on BFI Player. But if you can see it in the cinema, you can go in London, you can go in Manchester, Sheffield, Cardiff, Nottingham, Edinburgh, Curzon, Bloomsbury, ICA, are both the London sites. It's a very special experience, and I can't wait to have it in the dark on the big screen. Maya, what a delight. Thank you so much. A real honor to speak to you.
It has been an honor also, Mia. Thank you very much. If you're watching the cinema, please pay attention in the sound. If you watch at home, please use headphones, because the sound is a very important part of the film. So try to... Watching the cinema is really a different experience for the people that can.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.